Time for another Q&A. Let's get right into it. So, low ferritin with Hashimoto's treatments. I am lacking context with this question or maybe not interpreting it correctly. I don't know what your Hashimoto's treatment is. So, it is highly likely I might be answering this incorrectly. But what I will say is that one of the most common causes of low ferritin are infections. So, ferritin is like your savings account for iron. And a lot of infections can eat this up, parasites and viruses and bacteria. They will eat up this iron, resulting in depleting your savings account. Now, you can have optimal iron levels and optimal iron levels and low ferritin levels. Now, remember, blood work is just a snapshot of at that moment. So you could have ate something iron rich or something with more vitamin C to increase those iron levels. And so it's important to take that with a grain of salt and just focus on that low ferritin. But it is most likely from an infection. And if you have Hashimoto's, you for sure have an infection. So you really want to work on those infections to bring that ferritin level back up. Now, when it comes to that, let's say you have low iron as well, vitamin C, I actually find to be way better. And this was a tip from my mentor that vitamin C works better for increasing iron levels than iron itself actually does, believe it or not. In the context of like iron will cause a lot of gut issues. Like if it's transfusion, it's not as bad. But a lot of people are just having trouble absorbing iron. I mean, in combination with it being depleted from infections. But doing higher doses of vitamin C, as long as it's not too high that you turn into a pro-oxidant or you poop yourself, that can really help with the increase in iron absorption. And so eating more iron-rich foods and whatnot. And so if you're already doing stuff like that and you're still low ferritin, you're really considering infection, but also that cell danger response, because that plays a big role in iron status. And so I would look at infections, and once again, it could be parasite, it could be viral, it could be bacterial. So consider those infections and try some higher doses of vitamin C, which I think would be super applicable anyways in a Hashimoto's case to help increase that absorption of iron and whatever iron rich foods that you can tolerate. I would recommend increasing those and taking your vitamin C with those iron rich meals just to help increase that absorption. But as you go through this treatment process, and as long as you're coming out the other side healed, then you shouldn't have a problem with those ferritins anymore. So I do apologize. I don't have a lot of context. I don't know what your treatment is, but just consider infections and maybe increasing vitamin C and iron rich foods in the meantime. Um, why do some people repeatedly get hit with gout attacks? So gout is a buildup of uric acid, and that is basically just the inability to excrete uric acid. So it could be a liver problem, it could be a kidney problem, probably a kidney problem. So when we look at this, it's still going to come back to that cellular. So practice the foundation, so the light and dark cycles and structuring your water and the grounding principles and everything. So we'll start there to stimulate that redox of the cell, so the exchange of electrons, so you can actually neutralize toxins and properly detoxify. You can look at things like glutathione. Now, you're going to really want to consider injectable glutathione when it comes to dealing with a lot of things. And so I made a post on that, and I did put in the caption that when it comes to oral, it's just not that great. And most of the time we need injectable. But oral could have some sort of impact. Taurine and glycine and sulforaphane, those could all help the liver, but you might not want to be pushing those detox pathways due to other cellular issues. So foundations first, but you could also consider things like like a bioregulator like sphetinorm and peleotax. And what these bioregulators will do is sphetinorm is for the liver and peleotax for the kidneys. So they're going to go into the renal cells and hepatic cells, and they're going to tell them on an epigenetic level to heal. So you can really begin healing liver and kidney cells to help excrete that uric acid. I mean, there's a ton of stuff you could do in this regard, but the foundations can go a very long way. And looking at sphetinorm and peleotax and glutathione. But just be cautious of the glutathione, medical disclaimer, always consult your doctor. But the glutathione could stimulate more detox responses, so you just may have to start low and work your way up. Sometimes that's where oral glutathione could be a great introduction, because it is going to be so much less than injectable. So doing like a round of oral glutathione and then moving into injectable could really be beneficial. But it's going to be a broad thing of why somebody has gout. It's just going to be a broad thing, a broad cellular problem, and an inability to excrete that uric acid. It also comes from like metabolic byprocesses as well. So that's why we tend to see like diabetes, for example, have higher levels of uric acid, which can result in gout. So, focusing on insulin sensitivities and things like that, which I'll talk about here in a second for this other question, which is, what is neuropathy? How do people get this? And any idea what to do about this? So neuropathy is like damaged nerves. And so they just can't communicate and function properly. And we tend to really see this in diabetes. So a very common cause is glycation of this nerve cell. So high levels of glucose. And when we look at that, so some immediate things that you could do is the foundational work, the light and dark cycles, the magnetism to the earth, so the grounding principles and structuring your water, because stimulating that redox will reduce that cell danger response, because that cell danger response means the cell goes into containment mode and doesn't want to let these things in. And so when an insulin is trying to transport that glucose into the cell is rejecting it. And that's where we tend to see higher levels of not only glucose, but insulin as well. And so doing those basic foundations, but a super like missed thing is eating outside. Eat your food outside. And my constant feedback for like warm places is like, it's too hot outside. Like get an umbrella, put a fan next to you, put your feet in the grass and get some sunshine on you, because when you do that, you're increasing nitric oxide levels. Like you can watch, like if you are, I mean, you might have to be a little leaner, but you can see, you go in the sun and you'll see veins pop up. Like I remember when I dieted down to single digit body fat and I would go sit out in the sun, it was like in 30 to 60 seconds that my veins would just be exploding and you can see them. And that's because you're improving that nitric oxide. So you're improving blood flow, you're improving nutrient delivery, and you're increasing insulin sensitivity. So eating outside can really help reduce those glucose levels. And then things like, you could even look at things like berberine. Sometimes people don't do well with berberine because it also is an antimicrobial. Metformin can be really great. You just want to be very cautious with that one in the context of like dropping your glucose too low or pooping your pants. And so that's probably a big feedback, is gastric distress. But I think that's because people are not using, like timing it correctly, and they're using too much initially and they're not building up that tolerance to it. But metformin could be like a really good one. So neuropathy is just damage to the nerve cells, and it's usually due to glycation, usually due to glycation. There could be several other things. There could be viruses, because viruses tend to go, after fat, and then they can damage the nerve cells and whatnot. So neuropathy could be very viral related as well. There's a lot of things it could be. It could be just lack of regeneration. So stuck in that pro-inflammatory cell danger response. So you're not really repairing. So that's why the foundations, the light and dark cycles, the magnetism, and the structuring your water are extremely important. And then you can venture into things like metformin, berberine, or whatever to reduce that. Most people with neuropathy might not be able to do something like high intensity interval training, but high intensity interval training, so where you like blow out your lungs and you're gasping for air and everything, that can really help improve insulin sensitivity. And so then that can help with that neuropathy as well. Plus, you're going to rebuild new neurons and everything when you're doing that type of exercise. But, like my grandfather, for example, he's got gout and he's never going to do high intensity interval training. But, if someone's open to that high intensity interval training could be super beneficial. So just, I would look at glucose levels first, because it is the most, well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's a very common cause of the neuropathy, but it could be virus as well. So fighting viral infections and whatnot. So look there. What are the causes for constant sinus congestion? No other symptoms. So when you look at constant sinus congestion, it could be Th9 dominant, so a side of the immune system that produces histamine and such. And you would probably experience other symptoms. Now, one thing that I do want to say is sometimes people think they're not experiencing other symptoms, but they are. They're just like complacent to it, and they don't realize that those symptoms are there. And then when you really start talking to them and diving deep and like pulling things out of them, they eventually like say something and there's the other symptoms. But if it's just the sinus congestion, it's probably something in the sinuses. So you want to consider like nasal rinses. And so you could look at doing like a bit of biocidin in they have nasal machines. Like I like the bottles work, but I find that machine, I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a machine that like forces and sucks out the sinuses. And so you could really start clearing the sinuses that way using some biocidin, like just a drop of that in a sinus rinse. Even just the saline itself can be super beneficial. You could also use like some zeolite clay or some binders in there to help clear some things out. But there's probably like an infection or mold in the sinuses that need to be treated. If it's a lot of Marcons, so a lot of mold, then you want to look at like a BEG nasal spray. You can even look at a VIP nasal spray, because that will drive down inflammation in those sinuses. So there are some genetic components. Like for me, for example, like when I take melatonin, it's interesting because melatonin should be driving down mast cell responses, so driving down histamine, but my sinuses will get really congested for like 10 minutes after taking melatonin. It eventually clears up, but it's very interesting. So there's some concepts like that, but it's usually because something is in the sinuses, and then you need to treat them. Something that is really amazing is halotherapy. And so it just like you put the saline in And the process is just like the particles, it's making these particles of the salt. And this is where you like look at salt rooms. Like salt rooms can be very beneficial for that stuff, but you can get an at-home machine. Just look up halotherapy, and that could really help with sinus congestion as well, among many, many other things. Like a lot of people will attest when they go into the ocean and stuff that they tend to feel better or sinuses clear up because it's all that salt. So halotherapy is like an at-home device that you can use. Clearlight has a really good one. I'm sure there's many other ones out there, but halotherapy would be a really great thing to consider to help clear up those sinuses. But yeah, it's probably something within the sinuses that is leading to congestion if you truly do not have any other symptoms. And then thoughts on NAD plus, it's everywhere. So this is a big one. Number one, NAD supplements suck. You don't really have receptors for NAD supplements, so they don't work that well, or if at all in some cases. So I never say waste your money on NAD, but you have to be very careful when doing NAD. NAD, so there's a difference when it comes to NAD. Like NAD is made within the mitochondria to help with energy transfer and healing and repairing and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you are healthy and you do intravenous or injectable NAD, so intravenous NAD is going to be more of an instant hit, or injection is going to be like that prolonged, which, I think most people would prefer the injection. Plus, you can just do that in the comfort of your own home if you're comfortable with that. But if you're healthy, then you're kind of safe. It's going to go down a specific cascade that's going to help with repair and everything. But if you are unhealthy, which most people looking into NAD probably are, you can cause a lot more problems. You can cause more inflammation. You can cause tumor cell growth. You can cause a lot of issues by injecting or doing intravenous NAD. So I like too many people just go into ChatGPT and they look up, oh, hey, like what does this do? And they look at the mechanisms, like, oh my goodness, the mechanisms are amazing. Or, even from biology, you learn about what NAD does. And it's like, that doesn't mean you should just go inject it. And so you need that to be able to, those FAD molecules and everything, NMMT, to be able to transfer that NAD. And so if you don't have that ability, you could literally make yourself worse. You could feed into tumors, feed into cancer cells, feed into inflammation. So you don't want to be blindly doing NAD. You want to become healthier before you consider doing NAD. And then NAD can be just absolutely amazing with recovery and energy. And especially if it depends what you're doing. So if you're exercising and then you inject NAD, it's going to go more to like healing muscles, for example, where if you're doing like a lot of neurological stuff, like studying, learning, whatever, and then you inject NAD or prior, then it's going to help more with healing neurons and everything. And so it is pretty cool what it can do. You just want to be healthy. Now, what someone could start with is time plus from Nuchido. Yeah, Time Plus from Nuchido. And that there contains cofactors and ingredients to actually help guide that NAD the right way. So you could actually use that part of your healing journey is using Time Plus, making sure the NAD is going the right way. And then as you begin to heal and get into a better place, then you could look at injecting your intravenous NAD to really help heal even further. But if you are not healthy, do not do NAD. It is a risk that could make things worse for you. So that was all the questions for today. But someone sent me a DM very recently asking if they should do ivermectin during the full moon cleanse. And so ivermectin is good as an introduction. It's good because it's light. People tend to respond pretty well to ivermectin because it's not doing a lot of killing. It also has some viral components to it, like antiviral components and some immune modulation stuff. But when it comes to like treating protozoas and stuff, it's not going to do a very good job, if at all. And so when we look at a full moon, when we talk parasites around a full moon, we're thinking more protozoa, not worms like helms and stuff like that. And the protozoa are the microscopic ones. And so those ones there, you're going to need much more in-depth parasite protocols. In no way am I saying it's bad or don't do the ivermectin. I still think it's a great idea to do ivermectin. I have many clients do ivermectin, but if you're truly wanting to have an effective parasite protocol, especially a full moon cleanse, you really want to consider other herbs like clove and oregano and thyme and all these kind of things, wormwood and stuff that really help go after these protozoas. I'm still trying to find like sources that, contain a lot of antiparasitic stuff that are easily accessible, because there's a lot of great antiparasitic stuff out there. It's just very difficult to get them. Honestly, like I know I was on here like saying that I'm not really a fan of Cellcore anymore, but Cellcore can do a good job with their full moon. It's just I wouldn't do it consistently. Like I said, I'm working on getting other types of parasite protocols accessible to people, but Cellcore has their para 1, 2, and 3, and they have their full moon protocol, which can start 1 day before the full moon, 2 days before the full moon, or 3 days before the full moon. It just depends on your sensitivity, like your tolerance level. And like that would definitely be a lot better than something like ivermectin. But because ivermectin doesn't do a lot, that's what can make it great as an introduction to a full moon protocol. So yes, I would do ivermectin, especially if you've never done one before. I would do ivermectin during a full moon protocol. And if people are wondering like why, what the heck is a full moon protocol? So we know that during a full moon, we see melatonin decrease and serotonin rise, and serotonin is like crack to parasites. So we tend to see parasites more active during a full moon. And this is where like lunatic came from, like lunar, whatever stuff. Anyways, that's where it came from, because people would get crazier around a full moon, and they really correlated that to parasitic activity, because parasites do become more active during a full moon because they're feeding off that serotonin to move around the body and reproduce and all that kind of stuff. And so that's where we tend to see, or some people tend to see more symptoms around a full moon, is just for the basic fact that melatonin usually decreases and serotonin rises. Does that mean like, should you be supplementing melatonin around a full moon? Maybe, very contextual. Dark out your room and you're probably fine. But you still can take advantage of a full moon. I think it's something to do with the tide as well. It's something to do with like how close the moon is and all that sciencey stuff as well. So it's not just a matter of melatonin and serotonin. So even if you were like having optimal levels of melatonin and balanced levels of serotonin, you still could utilize a parasite protocol as per like the gravity or whatever. I can't remember. So do I think everybody should do a full moon protocol? Yeah, I do, as long as they're tolerable of it. And ivermectin could be a really good introduction into a full moon protocol if you've never done it before. But otherwise, I would like at this moment, I would look into Cellcore Para 1, 2, and 3. And eventually I'll have some other recommendations for parasite protocols. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. As always, if you have any questions, drop them below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.